Welcome to the Apotheosis of You, the show that empowers entrepreneurs by bridging the gap between knowledge and action.
We're your hosts, Sal and Saida, and on today's video, we'll review step 5 of Tai Lopez's 67 steps.
Tai Lopez has been a mentor of ours, and he has amassed a huge collection of knowledge, and from that knowledge he has compiled 67 steps, what he called the 67 frameworks to the good life. And so we are going to each step, breaking down the takeaway points. We are on step number 5, and he has some very exotic names of these steps. This one is called My Poor Friends and Cameron Diaz's Parrot, and he has a wonderful of tying that in. So about poor friends.
So, poor friends, he says that they talk about themselves too much, they share their opinions too much, versus rich friends,
Yep.
They always quote other people, quote smart people, quote books.
Exactly, and the
authors.
Quoting is like, you know how a parrot is trained to repeat what the owner tends to say a lot? He's saying that he has noticed his wealthier friends, his mentors, constantly referencing people that are greater than them. Just as a parrot would keep quoting other sayings, wealthy people quote greater minds, as opposed to what you were saying, which is average or poor people tend to just constantly give their opinions.
Yes.
And so that's a huge distinction that he has noticed between the poor and the wealthy. And he's also talks about not letting your friendship get in the way of getting great advice or determining who to listen to. What would be some examples of that? Of not listening to poor friends, for example, about finance?
Oh, of course, yeah. So basically, if you're seeking for advice, of course, seek advice from those that are great in that aspect of life. Let's say you want a love or relationship advice, you go to a person that is married for 50 to 60 years and ask them for advice. If you want financial advice, don't ask poor people for advice, ask rich people.
It sounds
right?
very obvious, but when you look at maybe our parents who have a great influence on us, maybe our siblings, maybe our friends, right? Just because someone was our homie since the 3rd grade doesn't mean that they are the right person to ask about a certain
advice
industry. And the same thing goes for if someone is right for asking them their advice on financial, that sector, that doesn't mean that they are also the right person to ask about relationship advice.
Right.
Because they may have excellent talent in amassing wealth and horrible relationship life. And so you want to ask someone else who has, like you said, maybe a 50-year marriage. You want to ask someone who's fit, and that person may not be fit.
Yeah,
and so,
don't ask fat people for advice on fitness.
Very eloquently stated. So you guys get the point. The overall,
not to be mean, but go for advice for fitness, person that is leaner and that is doing a right diet and going to the gym regularly.
One way of always keeping this in mind and filtering out who you should or should not ask advice from is you should be able to say yes to this question, which is, in this specific area that I'm asking advice for, would I trade places with that person?
Yeah.
If the answer is not a clear yes, then not that you're disrespecting them in any way, but find someone who you would very confidently say yes to that question, and you will get the best answer from that person. Tai said to be mindful when he is around his poor friends and wealthy friends of what they do differently, and take mental notes of how they spend their time, how they spend their money, who they associate with, and just, you don't have to say anything out, but be an observer. He talked about Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
How Sherlock Holmes is an observer of these things, and take mental notes about what you see wealthy friends do versus the poor friends. And he talked about a really good example of being blocked on Facebook by a particular person.
Right. He was giving an advice to his friend that has just opened a virtual assistant brokerage, and she was saying, if you guys need a virtual assistant, contact me. And he said, why don't you make it instead of a service business, why don't you make it a marketplace? And she took it as offense. Why are you trying to tell me what to do? And she blocked him.
Yeah.
Versus he went on dinner with
Later
Coach
that night.
Carl. Later
that
that night.
Yeah.
And while he was having dinner, Coach Carl was asking him for advices, and he was asking his opinion.
Coach Carl, by the way,
how-
is a Hall of Fame basketball coach.
Yeah. See how it differs? Rich friends, poor friends.
It's funny because the ones that are wealthy tend to be more cautious and tend to ask more. Like this person, Coach Carl, who's a Hall of Fame basketball coach, doesn't need to ask Tai about his opinion about certain basketball players or certain basketball elements, but he is humble enough and he is wise enough to get everyone's perspective versus someone who has completely not made it yet, thinking that they know way too much, that they don't need. I'm sure Tai Lopez was doing better than that person that blocked him, and he offered some free advice, and she blocked him, messaged him privately. It was just a great example of that. So he also talks about the fact that in modern day society we have this concept of racism that's based on the amount of melanin in our skin, which is something we completely don't have control over, right? It's ridiculous, but
we're not racist against
the thinkings.
I would say stupidity, but I know that he's gonna criticize me. I'll say ignorance.
Yes, a very acceptable synonym for the word stupidity. But we should be mindful and even very critical of the people that are weighing us down through their negative thoughts and their ignorance.
Yeah.
Versus the skin color. So we are approaching that in the wrong way. So as opposed to being focused on their skin color, focused on their thinking, their negative and bad attitudes towards life, that will hurt you so much more than what your friend's pigmentation color is. He also talks about how rich friends take much less units of risk to achieve the same ROI. Because they're constantly assessing things, they will get the same return or same success with much less risk involved. And the way they do that maybe by studying other people who have tried in that area, reading books in that area, and not going without the knowledge of other people's past failures.
Exactly.
So being humble enough to do that. Now, what if you don't have rich friends?
Well, if you don't have rich friends, then you should start reading books. Should start getting closer to those that have mastered one particular subject that you're working on, and seek advice from books.
Exactly.
Right? From authors that have done that before.
To think about it, if someone you looked up to, let's say Elon Musk, which is a person that we all know, were to mentor you one-on-one, that would be incredible, right? Or whoever it is that you look up to. But since that's not a scalable model, if that person has put their thoughts and philosophies and the keys to their success in a book or in an interview or what other format, they're essentially doing the next best thing as opposed to personally being able to mentor you, and you need to tap into that because it is as great as having that person call you on the phone and give you some advice. So be very, very conscious of where you're getting your information from, and if you don't have friends around you that you could get that information from, as Saida mentioned, tap into those books. One of the people that have done this very successfully is someone now that is considered to be, if not the most wealthiest person on the planet, the second wealthiest person.
Warren Buffett?
No, close. Well, Warren Buffett did study from Benjamin Graham, who did write a book, but he actually got to meet him face to face, and he was taught by him. He was one of his students. Warren Buffett was a student of Benjamin Graham. But I'm referring to Jeff Bezos.
Oh, Jeff Bezos.
Do you remember who he studied to become as successful as he is?
No.
Our friend Sam.
Oh, Sam Walton.
Yeah. So Sam wrote this book called The American Way, and Jeff didn't get to meet Sam within his lifetime, but he learned as much as he could from the philosophies that Sam poured into the written words and historically archived so that future generations can tap into it. So we have access to hundreds of thousands of books by wealthy minds that we can tap into. And we want to leave you with some thoughts that we all need to really, really dive into, which is we all have friends that are doing not as good as we are, and we have friends that are doing better than we are. What are the distinctions that we can see? Take mental notes. You don't have to tell them, hey, you're wasting your money on that, or hey, where are you
just
spending your money?
Observe and see what rich friends are doing and what poor friends are doing differently. Right?
One of the biggest things you can use to assess this is how are they spending their money? Where are they? What are they buying? Are they buying liabilities, like you mentioned before? What was it
Rust, RRD, rust, rot, and depreciate.
Precisely. Or are they buying assets, things that produce additional income? Are they investing in themselves? I think you gave a percentage.
I was talking to Sal today, saying that 30% of the money that we take home, after taxes, after everything, we should spend on ourselves. Meaning we should go to lectures, we should go to different conferences, buy books for that money, and just make ourselves better. 30%. How much of that money do you spend on yourself?
That's a great way of assessing.
On making yourself better, a better person, you know?
That may seem like a great amount.
It would be a better investment, the best investment you could have ever done.
Yeah. Materialistic things can get robbed or can depreciate, but if you have that knowledge within yourself, regardless of, I look at it this way. If someone like Grant Cardone, right? If he were to lose everything he had right now, except the knowledge in his head, he'll get it back.
Exactly.
And so that's how powerful knowledge is. A quote that best exemplifies what she just mentioned, and I say this because 30% may seem like a lot to some people, is a quote by Abraham Lincoln. He said, "If you give me 4 hours to cut down a tree, I'll spend the first 3 hours sharpening the saw." So if it's not 30%, it needs to be more than that, because you need to sharpen the mental saw of your mind. And so we wanted to leave you with the thoughts of what observations have you made about the differences between your friends that are not doing that well, and by poor we don't mean just financially. When it comes to relationship, when it comes to health, when it comes to any area of life, you can be poor or you can be rich or wealthy in that area. So what are some differences that you've gotten to notice? That is the thought that we want to leave you with. And also, if you want to view the full episode and the full 67 steps of Tai Lopez, which is over 67 hours worth of content that he has amassed through all of the books and interviews that he has done over the course of his career.
Yeah, and it's all under just $100.
That's an investment.
That's an investment into yourself. Yeah.
So you can find the link to the video to getting the 67 course for yourself, so you can view the entirety of these 67 lessons directly from him and take away your own points. We highly, highly recommend it. It is one of the best
investments that we've
it is worth a lot more than the $67 that it's worth. That he's charging for it. It's worth a lot more. So I wanted to leave you with those thoughts. Thank you for joining us on this episode.
Yeah, and find the link below or up here.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be in the descriptions, and we will catch you on the next episode.
See you later.
Awesome. That was great.